I'm happy to announce to everyone that the lesson, I hope you already have your module with you. You have a copy of the module. The lesson that you have there, which is the human person in society, is the second to the last lesson for this semester, as what the curriculum guide provides. So again, this is our second to the last lesson, which means that by next week we could have the last lesson in this subject for this semester. So we'll be done with the contents of the curriculum guide, which means that I just have to give more topics. That's what it simply means. I just have to give you more topics after this, or we can do some reinforcement of the topics that we've had before. I actually have a plan of doing the reinforcements because the previous knowledge is already there. They'll just be supplemented, so the lessons won't appear to be entirely new to the students. That more or less helps you. At the same time, it also helps me, as both of us have already a familiarity with the lessons that we have. So for this morning, I'm going to share a screen in relation to the human person in society. Someone So you have this screen, and I hope everybody can see this. Don't turn your cameras off, people. Please don't turn your cameras off. But allow me to turn my camera off because I've been receiving notifications this morning that the internet connection here in the school is unstable. So if I turn the camera off, hopefully this will stabilize the internet connection here, or the internet connection that I'm using. There. The human person in society. This discussion begins. Wait. Before I begin, I'd like to also share this to you. What and then there's a very good I have a very good reason of sharing this to everybody. Who among you, by the way, have tried visiting my YouTube channel?
I did, sir.
That's good. That's good. If you have visited my YouTube channel, I don't know if you found it, but there's actually a video in my YouTube channel that as of this time has 900, at least 916 views. It's a video, it's a Zoom class session that got 916 views. Last week it was at 800 something, and now it's at 900 something. So I'm sharing this to you because I'd like to remind you that there are people outside of this circle who probably watch the videos that I'm posting. Just so you'll know, that video has 22 likes. And where is that video from? That video is from my business finance class. How many students do I have in that business finance class? Only 2 students, Nicole Golosino and Nathan Mamakos. So while it puzzles me, it also astounds me at the same time as to how it reached that particular number of views. So I'm really sharing this to remind you that you should always be at your best. You should look to be at your best. Be at your best all the time. Appear to be at your best. Dress yourself well. Keep yourselves properly well kept. Hair should be not um, hair should be properly tied or properly kept. The face should always look fresh, char, because the world is watching you. Everybody is watching you. People perhaps from Luzon are watching. Who knows, babe? Who knows? One of them might post a comment and then say, "May we know the name of the boy who's wearing a pair of glasses?" And then be like, "Wow, who is this boy they're referring to? Could it be me?" Yeah, I'm referring to the boy with a stand fan behind him. That whenever he unmutes himself, it's like we are in the engine room of Ocean Jet. May we know the name of that boy? Why? We would like to recruit that boy. He could very well become a good drug pusher. We could recruit him as the new terrorist leader of our community. So always be at your best, people. Always look your best. Therefore, you should not turn your cameras off. Keep your cameras on. Turn them on so that the world would see you. The world could see your faces. Suddenly, all of your frames are black. But does that mean you turned your cameras off? Sure, did you turn your camera off? So you did not turn your cameras off, people, no? You did not. Okay. So what will you do now? Keep your cameras on, turn them on. Always be the always show your beautiful and handsome faces to the camera, because sooner or later someone might just ask for your name. Share screen. Okay. So the human person in society. This discussion begins by defining what society is. A society is seen to be a group. Of course, let's highlight that. It is a group of individuals involved in persistent social interaction. So it's a group of people, a group of individuals, individual units, and they interact. It's not merely a group that have gathered together. They're standing together, living together. What's quite a requirement in that group known as society is that a social interaction takes place. Persistent in nature, meaning it really is bound to happen. It's supposed to really take place. It's really supposed the individual units in that group are really supposed to talk among themselves. It is also seen as a large social group. And in that social group, they share a territory, a geographical and social territory. A geographical territory is one that pertains to the land that's being occupied by the group. A social territory is a particular area where they convene or commune or interact among themselves. Typically, and that territory is typically subject to political authority and dominant cultural expectations, meaning there is a way to rule or govern that authority. At the same time, there are expectations of behaviors, attitudes, norms, rules, and regulations that are to be followed in that territory. For authority to arise in that political authority to arise in the territory, the members of that social group have to follow rules and regulations, standards. A society constructs patterns of behavior by deeming certain actions or speech acceptable or unacceptable. So again, this has something to do with the cultural expectations. We have a specific term as societal norms. A society consists of like-minded people governed by their own norms and values within a dominant larger society, and that leads to the creation of a subculture. This society may even be illustrated as an economic, social, industrial, or cultural infrastructure made up of yet distinct from a varied collection of individuals. The concept of a society is more elaborated using the social contract theory. This is a view where persons of moral and political obligations are dependent upon an agreement or contract among them to form the society in which they live. Once a contract or agreement arises among these individuals, an interaction, just like what was mentioned earlier in defining a society, an interaction is bound to happen. An interaction is supposed to take place. That interaction is being agreed upon. That interaction of individuals leads to a relationship, a communal relationship. In that communal relationship, the individual persons or the individual units share among themselves their moral and political obligations. Why do they do that? Because then again, they've already agreed to form a group. By submitting themselves into forming that group, more or less, they have been obliged to share their moral and political perspectives. However, feminists and race-conscious philosophers have argued that the social contract theory is at least an incomplete picture of our moral and political lives. In fact, it may, or some of the ways in which the contract is itself parasitical upon the subjugations of classes of persons. So there is this stand of feminists and race-conscious philosophers that the social contract theory rather leads to subjugations of classes of persons. That there is a tendency for this social contract theory to try to dominate people as they are classified into strata, as they are put or defined with their respective classes. There is a tendency that in this society, as defined, as elaborated by the social contract theory, there is a tendency that in that society, one tends to stand out as domineering over others. That individual who dominates others might have the tendency to subjugate, meaning to overpower those who don't belong to the same class as he or she is. What are the different forms of society? We have a hunting or gathering society. It's not hunting gathering, it's hunting and gathering society. You have a pastoral society, a horticultural society, an agrarian or agricultural society, a feudal society, an industrial society, and a post-industrial society. So you have 7 forms of societies. To begin, you have the hunting or gathering society. What kind of society is found in that community? These societies rely primarily on hunting wild animals. They go fishing, they search for wild fruits, berries, vegetables to support their form of diet. This is the practice before domestication of animals had been done. In the absence of domestication, in the absence of domesticated plants and animals, gatherers of wild fruits, vegetables, hunters of wild animals relied on foraging with whatever it is they could find in the forests. Not until they learned the culture of domesticating or raising their own plants or raising animals to provide or support their means of livelihood or and diet. A pastoral society. A pastoral society is one that relies on herding or flocks. As it turns out, this kind of society is nomadic. Why is a pastoral society nomadic? A pastoral society relies on where the flock thrives, on where the herd thrives. If in that particular location, food cannot anymore be, or there's not much food anymore to feed the flock or the herd, then the society moves to somewhere else where the herd or the flock is provided with food. So they tend to transfer, this kind of society transfers from one location to another in order to sustain the dietary needs of the flock or herd that they're also tending to. The horticultural society. The horticultural society is one that is devoted to the study and cultivation of plants. So a horticultural society is dependent on plants, on the growing of plants. The agrarian or agricultural society is a society with an economy that is based on producing and maintaining crops and farmland. So it's not just in the concept of having animals to tend or having plants to grow, but we really have crops, so many of the crops and the maintenance of farmlands that makes the agrarian or agricultural society distinguishable. You have the feudal society is the next kind of society where a ruler or lord offers mounted fighters a unit of land to control in exchange for military service. So you have a feudal society where you have a feudal lord or a landlord asking people to do something for him. Yeah, it's a lord, so it's a man. Something for him in exchange for a portion of land that he is lending or giving, not necessarily giving, allowing the occupants to borrow for the purpose of residential occupancy. The form of equivalent exchange might be in service, or it could be in the form of monetary payment, or in the form of protection that the occupants of the land will offer to the feudal lord. You have an industrial society as the next type of society. An industrial society is driven by the use of technology to enable mass production, thereby supporting a large population with a high capacity for division of labor. That is why in history, there is what we call as an industrial revolution, which gives rise to technological advancement with the help of supporting mass production. But beyond the industrial society is another one, the last one, a post-industrial society. This is the stage of society's development when the service sector generates more wealth than the manufacturing sector of the economy. So when the service sector gains more or benefits more, has earned more than the manufacturing sector, it now goes for the post-industrial society. What does the world say? What does philosophy say about the human person in society? First, we are seen to be part of a society, that each of us is a part of a society, whatever we may think. It cannot be denied that each of us belongs to a particular group, and in that group, we interact. We commune with others, we share what we know of some things, and in the same way, others share whatever it is that they also know. No matter how small that group is, that group already counts in itself as a society. Whoever are members of that group, that is already a society. Our individual families stand as society units in themselves. The presence of a father and a mother with a child, though there are just three in that household, already counts as a society, because in that small group an interaction already takes place. In that small group, the individual units have moral and political obligations to share among themselves. That individual group has cultural expectations to be shared and have standards, societal norms to be also followed. Another thing that philosophy says about society is that it is the regularities, customs, and grounds of anti-human behavior. So, as already emphasized earlier, society brings out what sets behavior to be acceptable and unacceptable. Societies regulate behavior. Societies tell you what you should do, what you should not do. That if you do something, there's a consequence. Be it a good consequence or a consequence that's not good, a consequence comes. Where are these consequences identified? Where are they noted? In the regularities, customs, traditions, standards, norms of the group. Society does not exist independently without the individual. That's another concept. Society always is bound to the individual who makes it up. Society will always consider the individual that makes it up. Wait, someone sent a message in the group. Yes, it's all right, Raj. Society will always look into who makes it up, who makes up that group. That the characteristics of the members who make up that group matter in the formation of the entire society. Society exists to serve individuals, not the other way around. So there is this wrong notion that the individuals exist to serve society. Unfortunately, that's not how it should be. Rather, the society exists to serve the individuals that make it. But this also goes to show that the individual members have a role to perform. That one's membership, that a person's membership in that society is in relation to the membership of the other groups. Therefore, it is equivalent to saying that what you should do is in the service of the other members who belong to that other group. Society has become an essential condition for human life to arise and to continue. As interaction takes place in this group known as society, there is a chance now by which civilizations can really continue existing. Look at what happened to the Neanderthals. History shows, or historical records show, that the Neanderthals have been pushed to stay in caves because a dominant ancestral group turned out to be composed of more and has exhibited more behaviors and dominant behaviors that they have continued existence at that time. They rose up to the occasion, their existence continued, and they were able to push a minor civilization to a corner, thereby the Neanderthals, leading to the Neanderthals extinction. Records even showed that probably the Neanderthals were the Neanderthals. I'm looking for the right one. The Neanderthals embraced the practice of that dominant ancestral group. One important fact that philosophy provides regarding the human person in society is that the individual is the basic component of a society. It always starts with the individual units in that society, like who they are, who this person is, what characteristics that person has, what behaviors that person tends to manifest. All of these things are attributed to that single unit, to that individual, considered as the basic unit of society. The interaction of individuals with each other gives birth to a group. And that's already emphasized earlier. It's what matters. It's how you interact and build relationship among individual units that really matters. The social groups interact and develop relationships, and that leads to a society. Without interaction, without building that relationship, that group will just be called a group. It's not even safe to call that group a group of acquaintances, because at least the acquaintances would try to find time to say hi, hello among themselves. They need to acquaintances at some point interact. But if you do not, then you can't be part of a society. Therefore, the requirement is, again, an interaction has to take place. Within that society, there are patterns and groupings on the basis of likeness and differences. To have likeness is just normal. Likeness creates a chain of relations among the individuals having similarity in one or more conditions. Like for instance, they share the same age. They have likeness in terms of their professions. They have likeness in terms of their hobbies, in terms of their choice of activity to do during free time. They may also have differences of opinions, differences of political views. But despite these differences, an interaction is still supposed to happen. Just because a difference or differences are obvious between or among individual units in the society doesn't mean that the members do not interact. I mean, you cannot expect everybody to have likeness, to have the same likes all the time. That likeness is absolute until the end of time. At some point, it is expected that the individual units in that society will meet differences. But these differences are to be discussed. They are to be perhaps shared. Maybe because one member in that society has not been informed that such a reality exists. So that difference has to be shared. But by sharing that difference to other people, one must be ready that others will not accept that difference right away, or will really stand that they will not accept that difference at all. What's important here is the interaction has taken place. Likeness, or I've already said this, consciousness of kind is developed in a society, and the people of similar interests are joined together, rustling in the formation of various groups and categories. So once likeness is developed, in the context of likeness, from that society, groups, smaller groups, various groups can still be created. If you look at the community where you belong, perhaps the membership to a small group is an offshoot of this likeness. A common youth group is the parish youth ministry. I don't know if it still exists now. But before, assuming that it still exists, I think it does exist up to this time. The parish youth ministry is a small group of individuals who share the same interests. And that's their service to the parish. And they are composed of youth members. So see the similarities there. See the likeness. They have the same direction. They are geared towards the same purpose. At the same time, they belong to the same age bracket. The good thing is, in the presence of differences in the society, life would not be monotonous. Without difference in cultural conditions, human life would have been monotonous, and probably in which little change is probably limited, in which little change is predictable. In the absence of differences, monotony is quite true. A quick segue, but this is really significant. Have you seen that episode in SpongeBob where Squidward transferred to a village? There is that episode. Squidward was offered, or if, I think he received a call that he got the opportunity to transfer to a village who lived, who is also composed of, what is Squidward? Squidward is an octopus. A squid. Duh. Squidward is a squid, obviously. That village, it's like a subdivision, is composed of squids who look like him, who do the same thing as he does, and then who developed the same routine as he does. At first, Squidward enjoyed the concept of it. Like when he got into the place, he saw that all of the houses are of the same design as the house that he had. I'm not making this up. This episode in SpongeBob really exists. This episode came out because of the flute thing. It's that episode. So when Squidward reached the subdivision, again, he was so happy to have seen that all of the houses are uniform, are the same as how his house looked like. And then he knew that the squids in that subdivision played the clarinet because SpongeBob plays the clarinet. He was so happy when he found out that all other squids there play the clarinet in the same way that he does. Squidward rides a bicycle, and when he found that the occupants of that subdivision do the same thing, he was so happy. Days passed, he did the same thing as what these other squids are doing in that subdivision. But eventually, he felt that things are just so boring. He saw that the monotony in that subdivision was not something worth looking forward to. He, though he did not admit it, it seemed as though he missed the kind of life that he had outside of that subdivision. It's all right, Alan. Yes, you may. So that's the monotony that we do not want to experience if differences are not found in a society. The presence of a monotony again removes the presence of a difference, sorry, the presence of differences among ourselves removes monotony in society. These differences lead to variety of human behaviors and division of labor. Thereby, the process of specialization is also developed. As we differ in our interests, field of expertise, then we get to be assigned, or perhaps we get to choose for ourselves the areas where we could also excel. And that's the process of specialization. In a society, the system of give and take relationship creates reciprocal roles in human life. In here, in a society, man becomes dependent for basic needs satisfaction, like for the need for food, protection, education, and etc. It's also seen that society is broader than human society. It is in this situation where social action or interaction in terms of particular kinds of awareness exists. In a society, there is what we call as a social order, and this is a prerequisite, this is a requirement. There needs to be a social order in a society. A social order is a form of order that arises spontaneously when rational and mutually aware individuals succeed in solving coordination problems. There is a need for social order in a society, and that maintains societal norms. Without social order, though people interact, interactions will become unregulated. Behaviors towards each other will become unregulated, and that would lead to a chaotic community, to a chaotic group. To maintain, to control, or to avoid situations of chaos in that social group, a social order has to be maintained. Sometimes that kind of order is imposed legally or perhaps by political obligation. However, there are others who feel as though social order is a moral obligation as well. They feel like it's their obligation to maintain social order, as they also want to maintain good relationships with the other members of the society. In a society, communication plays a role in achieving collective agreement on the way the world is to be classified and understood as a precondition of coordination and cooperation. It is imperative that people communicate. Without communication, there's nothing that will be achieved. The interaction cannot be attained. That relationship cannot be attained if the members do not communicate among themselves. This now brings us to the last area of this discussion, and that's how society enables a person to become better. How does society enable me to become a better person? First, you have to think of what good things you can offer to society. Ask yourself, given that these are my strengths and weaknesses, given that these are my limitations, given that these are the things that I can do, what good can I offer to society? So society has to be put at the center. And then, why will you put it at the center? This is not in the service of society. Like what said, we do not serve society. We are serving the members who are part of that society. What we do, it's not really for the word society itself. It's not really for the creation of the group, but for the individuals who are part of that group. You also need to determine who you really are. By knowing who your person is, who you stand for, what your real nature is, you can go back to the first suggestion. This could remind you of what you can really offer. There's also a suggestion that you might want to try to be one of the people that show the characteristic of becoming a better person. You study the society. Try to understand how individuals in that society work, how they relate with one another. Then you might identify a person or two who exhibit good characteristics, meaning these members in that society are showing behaviors of a better or good person. And you might want to emulate these persons. You might want to look into what they're doing and then consider doing the same thing. Take note, it's it's given as a suggestion. It's not given as a demand that you should copy what others are doing. It's just merely suggested that you study the persons who are part of the community, you look at what they're doing, how they have become better persons, and you might want to do the same. You can contribute to society through your decisions or actions. Lastly, society recognizes the capability of the person to develop and provide its members with opportunities to better themselves. There's just so much in a society that helps an individual unit to become better. But of course, the individual person must be ready to also absorb absorb what society provides, at the same time respond to what society gives him or her. So that's the end of the discussion. Do we have some questions? What I really like with this discussion is that it's contextual and subjective at the same time. Why? Then again, each of us belongs, like what was already said, each of us belongs to a society. This is just a reminder of what you can do in the group where you belong. What you are going to perform now that you have been reminded that you really belong to a societal group, to a social group. Questions? Clarifications? If there's none, I think we can call it a day. We can end it there. Are you sure there are no more questions? So that being said, thank you so much for the time, grade 11. Goodbye and thank you.
Bye, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Bye,
you.
sir.